Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Blueprints from Z-Man Games. Blueprints is all about, well, blueprints. You're actually building structures, and you have your little blueprints, your plan cards that you use behind a screen in order to keep your blueprint secret from the others, because I guess you're competing construction companies? Sure. And you're trying to use dice to actually build on these cards, so which is a very interesting concept. You're building a structure out of dice. And if you look on the front of the box, I know it's kind of hard to see here, the structures in the back are actually dice, which is one of the coolest parts of the game because I really love that front artwork. Does the rest of the game live up to that theme and art style? Well, let's take a look at it, then we're going to come back and give you my final thoughts. Alright, here's the initial setup for Blueprints. Each player is going to take a screen of their appropriate color and put their scoring marker on the one or just off the board space of the scoring track. You're going to lay out these different cards representing the different awards. There's 3 cards in each awards pile, 3, 2, and 1, the gold, silver, and bronze. And then there are 3 cards each of the prize cards. So you have well, I'll explain all those in a minute. You also have a bunch of these blueprint cards, so you're actually going to shuffle these up and deal 1 card out to each player, and they're going to keep that behind their screen. That's the blueprint that they're going to be working on. And then you have a bag that is going to be full of all of these different colored dice. So once you get through the initial setup, you decide who's going to go first, and then the game will begin. Now, the first thing you're going to do on your turn after dealing out a blueprint card to each of the players is you're going to put all the dice in the bag, and I so carelessly took them all out just so I could show them off. And then you're going to draw 2 of those dice at random. I guess I could have grabbed any 2. And you're going to put those on the in-demand material spot. So you know that there's less dice of those colors that are in the bag, and those are also going to be tiebreakers, which I'll get back to in a minute. Then you're going to draw, depending on the number of players, let's just say this is a 4-player game, you're going to draw 7 more dice from the bag, and you're going to roll them into the center of the table. So we'll have, I think that's 7 there. You're going to roll them out, lay them out by, you can do it however you want, but we do number and color just to keep them all separate. And then decide who's going to go first. And on your turn, it's very simple. What you're going to do is draft, take one of the available dice, put it behind your screen and onto your blueprint card. Then you're going to take another die, a replacement die from the bag, roll it, and put it back into this, the pot, so to speak, of available dice. Now, when you take a die and put it on your card, this is what one of the typical blueprint cards looks like. There'll be different formations. So, in other words, it might be like this. There'll be different numbers. The areas that are not shaded in are the spots where you can put your dice. And the number inside there does not represent the number on the die. Instead, it represents how many dice can be placed in that spot, how high you're trying to get it. Now, you're going to get a 6-point bonus at the end of the round if you're able to build your structure exactly as the blueprint has it. So, in other words, if you're able to have 3 dice, or if you're able to have dice in each of these spots and have it exactly like that, 2 dice high there, then 1 dice high, then 3 dice high, you're going to get a bonus of 6 points. But unless you're placing in an empty spot, there's actually a special rule as to how you can place dice on top of one another. The previously placed die that you're trying to place on top of has to be of equal or lower value. So the higher you go, the higher the number has to be. You can never move a die once it's placed, and you can never change the value either. Now, once every player has drafted and placed 6 dice, then the round is going to end and you're going to go into scoring. If you have perfectly matched your blueprint like I described before, then you're immediately going to gain 6 points. So you're going to move your score marker up on this track. And then you're going to go and look at the different dice that you've used to actually build your construction with, and then go for the different prize cards. For instance, let's go ahead and use this blueprint card over here as an example of how you can score the different types of dice that you might be able to draw. And we'll start with the orange dice. Now, the orange dice, how that's going to work is that whatever dice are adjacent to an orange die, always orthogonal or on top of or below, you're going to get 2 points for each of those. So in this case, there's an orange die there. There's 3 dice around it, so you're going to get 2 points for each of those. Yeah, I think that was a legal move. Okay, so you'll move your track up again. I was able to get 6 points, so I'll go up to 12. For the green dice, it's just a matter of how many green dice you have. We'll keep that there. So the more green dice you have, the merrier. So let's say for 1 green die, I'm only going to get 2 points, but if I have 2 green die out in my structure, I'm going to get 5 points, then 10 points, and 15 points, and 20 points, and 30 points, which is the maximum you could possibly get. So the more green dice, the better. Those are called the recycled dice. The orange dice are called wood. Sorry. The black dice, those are depending on how high in the pile that you are. So, for instance, 1 black die is just going to be worth 2 points, but if you're able to build it higher and higher, I keep taking the in-demand materials dice, but if you keep taking building higher and higher, you'll get 2 points and 3 points and 5 points, then 8 points depending on what floor of the building it is. And finally, the glass dice, those are going to be scored depending on the worth of its value that is the top die. So even if they're covered by other dice. So if it's a 4 in your building, a 4 clear die, the glass, you're going to get 4 points. And even if that's covered up, you're still going to get those 4 points. So glass can be pretty in demand because they're just easy points to get. So let's just say, theoretically, this is how final scoring ends up after all of that is worked out. Depending on where your score is on the track at this point, you're going to have the option for to vying for control for these awards cards. This is now, not all these cards are used depending on the number of players. We're just assuming a 4-player game here. But in this case, the highest player, scoring player in that game, in that round, is going to take the gold prize, which is going to be worth 3 final victory points at the end of the game. Then you have silver, which is going to be worth 2, bronze, which is going to be worth 1. Now, if there's ever a tie for whoever's going to get one of the award cards, and because only one of them can be awarded each turn, then you have to break the tie depending on the in-demand materials, and that's the other thing that these 2 dice are finally used for. First, it's the first in-demand material, then the second one. Whoever has the most, whoever's tied that has the most of, in this case, the black die in their structure is going to get that. If it's still a tie, then it goes to the green, whoever has the most green dice. Then if it's still a tie, you're just going to go based off who went last in the turn order. Now, once you get done vying for the awards cards, then you're going to go on to the prize cards. Only 1 of each type is awarded, although one person may be able to get more than 1 of each type, I'm sorry, more than 1 of different types on their turn in a round. But again, if there's a tie, you have to go to the tiebreakers, which is the in-demand materials. So one of the prizes is the Skyscraper. If someone manages to build a building that is 5 or greater, they're going to have a shot at getting that card. Another one is the Structural Integrity Prize, which is that it has to be a building that includes 4 or more dice of an identical value. And remember that you're drafting these constantly, so players are vying for the same prizes, so you're trying to get them while keeping them out of the hands of your opponents if you've been keeping track and you think they might be going for it. You have the Geometers Prize, in which case you have to have dice of all values 1 through 6 in your structure. And finally, you have the Materials Prize, in which you must include 5 or more dice of the same color in your structure. You're going to do this 3 times. You have 3 different rounds to play. Each time, you're going to reset your score markers, put the dice back in the bag, draw new ones, get new blueprints cards, and do it all over again, trying to get those awards cards, trying to get those prize cards, and adding up the points that are present on each of those cards at the end of the game. Whoever has the most points is the winner. That's blueprints. This is going to be one of those odd reviews where I say that a game is just okay. And that's what Blueprints is. It's not horrible by any stretch of the imagination, and there is some interesting aspects here and some fun to be had, but there's also some bad parts of it, and for the most part, it's just not a very exciting experience, and it's not okay for a game to just be okay anymore. There are so many games competing not just for my attention, but for everyone's. There's hundreds and thousands of games. You know, games released every single day of the week that you have to be exceptional to stand out, and Blueprints just doesn't quite rise to that level, because while it has some interesting graphic design, and while the concept of it is interesting, thematically and as far as how you score points in this game, it just doesn't come together, and it just sort of falls flat in those areas enough that I don't have a strong desire to play it, even though it wasn't a horrible experience. I've definitely gone ahead of myself here, but we'll start back. Let's talk about that theme a bit. As I said in my intro, it's a cool idea. I like the idea that you're competing architects and that you're building a building on your blueprint, but you're using dice to do it. That is so neat to me. The problem is, once you get over the initial setup of that and explaining the theme to the players in the game, it quickly devolves into a pretty themeless experience. I don't really have a huge problem with abstract games. It's just that I feel like it was a wasted opportunity here, especially since even the achievement cards don't make a lot of sense. I mean, your goal is to build your blueprint. You know, you're supposed to build it as best you can. And now all of a sudden you're going for all these other different prizes and making the building funky and going for, you know, the tallest skies, to have this skyscraper and to use different materials. That might work from a point gaining exercise because you're just trying to gain the most points as possible, but it doesn't really work from a theme. Why would you go off of your blueprints, if that makes any kind of sense? So really it becomes an abstract game very, very quickly, but the game does look pretty and I like the artwork style, and I even like the dice, even though they're just normal dice. I like that they use all these different colors. That sounds weird, but as far as the gameplay goes, I like dice drafting games. I don't think there's enough of them. In fact, I think maybe the only other one I have is Castle Dice, which is a fantastic game. So that's one of the things that turned me on to Blueprints and I wanted to give it a shot. And it is interesting in how it works. I mean, it works just fine. The problem is, I think that a lot of people, and I've seen comments like this about the game, think that this is like the Eurogamer's dice game. But Eurogamers hate randomness. And in this game, the randomness of the dice and the dice that you can draft on your turn can just destroy your game. It is very, very possible, and it is likely that there will be some turns where you can just not get the dice that you need, and that another player gets everything that they need to complete their structure. The right numbers, the right colors, just everything they do to blow past everyone else. And you know, there's a weird snowball effect in this game, because if one player does exceptionally well in a turn, the way the scoring works is that because you're effectively going for these different achievements and going for as many points as around in order to earn the award cards, which give you the final scoring points, if you can do really, really well in one round, you're going to go way ahead of the other players. And that can happen. You can get all the right numbers that you need, the right materials that you need, and get more than one of the achievement cards in one round. And that's great if you're that person. But if you're not, if you just do not have the right dice come out when it is your turn to draft, then you are going to have a very miserable game. Now, the game is not too long, but I think it's longer than it should be for sure. Because for the size of it and for just being a random dice game at its core, the game can be prone to AP if you're, you know, especially when you're thinking, how do I get as many achievements as possible? So I guess what I'm saying from that is that I don't like how the scoring works in this game, and I did mention that earlier. Because I would rather that you just do as many things as you possibly can on your turn and get as many points as possible, like a true point salad game, than just vie for these achievements against other players, and you have to worry about tiebreakers, and then everything resets and you're just trying to get more points to go for awards cards. I guess that sounds neat on paper. It doesn't really work very well in implementing it. It just seemed like a very dull and tedious thing to me. So, it's really not a terrible game. There's things that I like the theme, what there is of it. I guess I like the idea of the theme, and I like the cool dice, and I like the concept of building the dice on the blueprints cards, but that's really it. The rest of it just feels like sort of a chore to go through the motions of. I know that there are people who would really like this game because you can sort of get that brain burn going on and sort of plan out the best method you can to get as many achievements as possible. And I'm sure there are people who have achieved like 3 achievements all at once because they can do all that sort of planning. But I'll tell you, no matter how much planning you do, if you can't draft properly because the dice just weren't there for you, or someone else took the dice that you needed, then doesn't matter how much planning you do. So in a game that's just upfront about it, and the game is quick, and you know everyone's in the same boat as far as the chaos and the randomness, that might not be a big deal. And here it sort of stands out starkly. So Blueprints, for me, it's a pass. You might get some enjoyment out of it if you like those sort of brain burnery games, but it could have been a lot more.